Hey, Mama, do you ever feel stuck? Like, no matter how hard you try, it's just not enough. Maybe you're overwhelmed by motherhood, struggling in your relationship, doubting your progress in your sobriety, or even questioning your purpose. The enemy loves to plant these lies in our minds to keep us from fully stepping into God's purpose. But here's the truth: you don't have to stay stuck. God's word is full of promises that break every lie the enemy throws at you. In today's episode, we're uncovering some of the biggest lies that can keep us as moms feeling trapped and inadequate and are replacing them with the truth, God's truth. So if you're ready to show the enemy that he holds no power over you in your life and you're ready to start believing what God says about you, reheat that cup of coffee and let's get started. Welcome to the Faithful Sober Mom podcast, the show where we talk about all the highs, the lows, and everything in between when it comes to navigating faith, sobriety, and motherhood. I am your host, Courtney Barron, an entrepreneur and work-from-home mom, here to help you take your power back, let go of who you used to be, and step into a life of purpose and meaning so that you can live a life truly free from alcohol and be the amazing, successful mom that I know you can be. Join me each week for real, raw, and honest conversations where I share with you valuable tools and resources, practical tips, inspiring insights, and so much more that will leave you feeling uplifted and empowered to take on whatever life throws at you. So grab your favorite coffee, tea, or beverage of choice, non-alcoholic of course, and let's dive into this week's episode. Hey Mama, welcome back to the Faithful Sober Mom, the show where we talk about all the highs, the lows, and everything in between when it comes to navigating faith, sobriety, and motherhood. I am your host, Courtney Barron, and I am grateful to have you here with me. Our house was hit yet again by another sickness, so please forgive me. Last week we talked about spiritual warfare, and I really wanted to continue that conversation with you because I know what it feels like to constantly struggle with self-doubt, to wonder if you're doing enough or if you'll ever get to where God is calling you to be. Right now, maybe you feel like you're failing as a mom, or you're struggling in your relationship, doubting your progress in sobriety, or even questioning your purpose. And I want you to know that you're not alone. So today we're going to be exposing some of the lies that the enemy is using to keep us stuck, lies that make us feel unworthy, incapable, or disqualified from the life that God is calling us to live. But God's truth is always greater than the enemy's deception. The Bible tells us that the truth will set us free in John 8:32, and I am a firm believer in that. So that's exactly what we're going to do in this episode. We are going to replace the lies with God's truth so you can fully step into the purpose he has planned for you. So grab your pen and paper because you're going to want to write these down. And if you're not able to right now, that's okay. You can always come back later when you can. All right, so let's get started. Lie number one: I will never be enough. How many times have you caught yourself thinking, I can't do this? Whether it's feeling overwhelmed by motherhood, doubting your ability to succeed in making money from home, or wondering if you'll ever be good enough in your relationship. This lie sneaks into every corner of our lives. The enemy wants us to believe that we are lacking, incapable, and not enough. As a mom, it whispers that you're not patient enough, fun enough, and not doing enough for your kids, that you always need to do and be better. As a wife or a partner, it says you're not lovable enough, not supportive enough, or selfish for wanting your needs met. In business and working from home, it will make you believe that you're not smart enough, talented enough, and are incapable of success. And I don't say these things to make you feel worse or affirm them more in your mind, because truthfully, we don't need to hear them any more than we already do. But it is important to bring attention to them in order to recognize and replace them with God's truth. Over the last 5 years, the enemy has made me believe each and every one of those lies as my truth, leaving me feeling lost and stuck in motherhood, that I was crazy to think that I could be a mom and work from home. But that's all they were: lies. The enemy feeds on comparison, making us feel like we are falling short in all areas of our lives. But God never asked us to be enough on our own. In 2 Corinthians 12:9 and Philippians 4:13, he calls us to lean on him and to find strength in him in times of weakness. So when you feel inadequate, remember that God's strength fills every gap where you feel weak. You don't have to be enough because You are already chosen, equipped, and enough in God's eyes. Lie number 2, I'm a failure. This lie makes you feel that no matter what you do, it will never be right. Maybe you lost your temper with your kids, you made a mistake in your relationship or your marriage, had a setback in your business, or struggled in your sobriety. The enemy loves to take these moments and whisper, see, you failed again. Why keep trying? But I'm here to tell you that failure is not final. God is not measuring your worth by your mistakes. He's looking at your heart and your willingness to get up and keep going, even in times of struggle. I will never forget the time when I lost my first major client in my marketing business. But instead of accepting the circumstances for what they were, I internalized them and told myself that I was a failure and that I would never amount to anything, as I was told countless times before. At the time, I was already feeling unfulfilled, like something was missing. And that is when I realized that I was being called for something more. I do go deeper in the first couple episodes of the podcast, but through that struggle, God revealed to me what that calling was. And that was when I started my current business, Revitalizing Hope. The enemy loves to twist our setbacks into identity statements. Failing at something doesn't mean that you are a failure. The Bible is full of people who fell short, but God still used them to deliver his message. The enemy wants to keep you down, but God is calling you forward. As it says in Proverbs 24:16, failure is not final. What matters is that you keep getting back up. Even your mistakes and failures can be used for God's plan. He isn't looking at your failures. He's holding you up through them, leading you in the right direction. Line number 3, I'm too broken to be used by God. Have you ever looked at yourself and thought, God could never use someone like me? Maybe you've made mistakes that you regret, or you've had to walk through trauma that you haven't fully healed from, and it still weighs heavy on your heart. Or maybe you're currently experiencing a season of brokenness that is making you feel unworthy. And that is what the enemy wants. The enemy wants you to believe that your brokenness disqualifies you, but the Bible tells a different story. Over and over again, God uses the most broken, imperfect people to do his greatest work. Your past mistakes or shortcomings, whether they're past or present, doesn't define you. God does. Now, I had this calling in my heart very early on in my sobriety journey that someday I would share my story to inspire others and make an impact. I envisioned myself as an author and a keynote speaker on some of the very stages of conferences I was attending. I told myself, one day that's going to be me up there. And nearly a decade later, I'm just starting out again, trying to make that vision a reality because I believed that my story was never good enough or worthy of making a difference, that I didn't have enough years of sobriety to be credible, and the difficult seasons that I was experiencing over the years somehow disqualified me because how am I supposed to help others when I can barely help myself? This lie is one of the enemy's greatest weapons. Your past may be messy. You may have made choices you regret, and you may still be struggling with things you thought you'd overcome. Now, I don't know your individual circumstances, but the enemy wants you to believe that because of your brokenness, you are disqualified from God's purpose and calling for your life. But like I said, God specializes in using broken people. The Bible is full of them. Your brokenness does not make you unusable. It makes you the perfect candidate for God's grace. As it says in Psalms 34:18, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Your brokenness should be drawing you closer to God, not further away. Your past does not define you. God has made you new, no matter where you've been. God still has a purpose for you. Line number 4, I have to have everything figured out before I can start. Raise your hand if you're an overthinker. Waiting until you have the perfect plan before you can start something, whether it's launching a business, stepping into your purpose, or even just figuring out motherhood. If that's you, you are not alone. The enemy wants you to believe that if you don't have all the answers, you shouldn't even try. But God calls us to step out in faith even when we can't see the full picture. This lie keeps so many people stuck in fear that we need the perfect plan before we can start our business, or have to take in all the information and have the perfect parenting strategy before we can be a good mom, or that we need to be completely healed before we can help others. And when things start to feel uncertain, we hesitate, overthink, and we stall. But God doesn't call us to have all the answers. He calls us to trust in Him. The enemy wants you to believe that uncertainty means failure, but in reality, it means faith. As it says in Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6, trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to Him, and He will make your path straight. You don't have to have it all figured out. God will guide you. And it really is all about God's timing. He gives us just enough light for the next step, not the whole journey. One of my favorite scriptures that I try to remind myself of all the time is Matthew 6:34. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. So stop overthinking the future and focus on trusting God and the plan He has for you. Line number 5, if I can't see progress, God must not be working. This is probably the biggest lie of them all. We live in a world of instant gratification telling us if we don't see results, it's not working. But God doesn't work that way. Right now, maybe you've been praying for something and your situation hasn't changed. Maybe you're pouring your heart into your kids, your partner, or your spouse, and you're wondering if any of it is making a difference. This lie can feel so real, especially when we're in a season of waiting. When we don't see immediate results, we assume that God is silent, that our prayers don't matter, or that nothing is happening. And that is exactly what the enemy wants. When I first started this business, I was so focused on monetization and doing things my way in order to make ends meet that I lost sight of why I started in the first place. So much so that I stopped trusting in God and my faith. I would give up before He even had a chance to show me He was working. And instead of letting God lead me to where He was calling me to be, I was the one trying to force things that weren't meant for me. I started living in fear and self-doubt of putting myself back out there after countless quote-unquote failed attempts, which is why I believe that this lie is the most powerful one of all. It opens the door for all the others, because when we don't see God working in our lives, we start doubting ourselves and Him. We start overthinking and second-guessing, telling ourselves that we're a failure and will never be enough, and believing that we are too broken to fulfill that purpose that God has for our lives, or that He's somehow forgotten about us. But faith is about believing and trusting in God even when we think we can't see or feel His presence. Think about when you plant a seed in the ground. Just because you don't see growth above the soil doesn't mean that it's not taking root. God is always working, even when we don't feel like He is, and just because we don't understand His timing doesn't mean that He isn't there. Galatians 6:9 tells us, "Let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." So keep going. Trust that God is working in your life, that His timing is perfect, and that your breakthrough is coming. Now, Mama, every one of these lies is designed to keep you stuck, discouraged, and doubting God's promises. But God's truth is more powerful than the enemy's deception. No matter where you are in your journey or which area of your life that you're praying for God to work in, whatever you do, don't let the enemy win. Keep moving forward in faith. Hold on to God's word and trust in His timing. I pray as you go about your day and your week that you can lay down your burdens and the lies the enemy has made you to believe and replace them with God's truth. When the enemy tries to whisper that you are not enough, I pray that you stand firm in the truth that God's grace is sufficient and His power is made perfect in your weakness. When you feel like a failure, may you remember that God does not define you by your mistakes, but by His purpose for you. If you've ever believed that you are too broken to be used by God, I pray that you see yourself through His eyes. redeemed, renewed, and created with purpose. When you feel the pressure to have everything figured out, may you find peace in knowing that God is leading you in the right direction, one step at a time. And when you don't see progress, I pray that your faith remains strong, trusting that God is always working, even when you don't see it. So, Mama, keep going, keep trusting, and keep holding on to His truth. If this message spoke to your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a message, share this episode with another mama who needs it, or consider leaving a review wherever you're listening. Until next time, Mama, remember that you are worthy, you are capable, and you are enough. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of The Faithful Sober Mom. If this podcast has resonated with you or helped you in any way, I would love to hear about it. Please consider leaving a review and sharing on social how this podcast has made an impact on your life. And don't forget to tag @FaithfulSoberMom. Doing so will help others just like you find our community so that they too don't have to feel alone in this season. If you would prefer a more private, closed space, I invite you to join our community of support where you can connect with other like-minded women to share your struggles and triumphs in a judgment and shame-free space. I look forward to connecting with you on social, and until next time, remember that you are worthy, capable, and you are enough.